At the beach with his fiancée, the Korean Mafia boss turns pale after seeing his ex with twins. He was a legend. The dragon of soul who painted the streets red and vanished like smoke. She was the only innocent thing he ever touched, so he chose death over dragging her into darkness. 5 years of hiding, 5 years of lies, until he sees her at his own resort, with 2 identical little boys, their eyes fierce like his own. His fiancée stands beside him, clueless. His carefully constructed paradise just shattered with his buried past, and the man who never showed fear is about to be exposed. This is the story of the enforcer who faked his death, and the woman who raised his warriors alone. Welcome to a love that survived the underworld. It just waited. Hey everyone, I'm back with another explosive Korean romance that's guaranteed to stop your heart. Before we dive into this mafia boss's nightmare reunion, tap that like button if you're obsessed with dangerous men who'll destroy anyone for family. I see you out there watching. Drop a comment with your city and the current time so our global squad can connect in the thread. And if you're new here, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next deadly twist in this unforgettable series. Alright, let's step into the fire. The Coral Bay Resort stretched across its private island like a postcard from heaven. Dong moved through his beachside tiki bar like he owned every grain of sand beneath his feet. Because he did, not through inheritance or business acumen, but through blood money laundered clean over 5 brutal years. At 38, he'd mastered the art of disappearing. His resort, Paradise Found, had become the ultimate sanctuary for tourists seeking tropical escape. His new identity was airtight, backed by forged documents that cost him 3 contacts and a bullet wound. His past had been buried so deep that even the syndicate believed the dragon was dead. And yet, as he laughed with Gung Woong behind the bar, her hand warm in his, he couldn't help but scan the perimeter. Old habits, 3 exits mapped, security cameras monitored. The weight of the blade still strapped to his ankle, even in paradise. Gung Woong didn't know any of this. She was busy mixing a batch of her famous coconut mojitos for the afternoon crowd, her smile genuine and unguarded. The perfect partner for a resort owner. Her kindness had never known violence. The diamond on her finger caught the sunlight, modest and sweet, chosen because she'd pointed at it through a shop window and said it reminded her of sea glass. Their wedding was 6 weeks away, a small ceremony on the beach at sunset. Everything was simple. Everything was exactly as he'd designed it to be, until he saw her. Near the surfboard rack, partially hidden by a family unloading beach gear, a woman stood watching 2 small boys race toward the water, her posture impossibly familiar. Same defensive stance, shoulders slightly raised like she was ready to fight or flee. Same graceful tension he'd memorized during 2 years of stolen moments before the world exploded. Matilda Graham. 5 years collapsed into nothing. He was 33 again, standing in their apartment with blood still under his fingernails, watching her sleep for the last time. He'd kissed her forehead, whispered that he loved her, staged his own murder before sunrise because the syndicate's enemies were circling, because staying meant watching her die, because loving her was the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. He'd convinced himself it was mercy, that Matilda would grieve and move on, find someone safe who worked in an office and came home without checking for tails. That love was a weakness enforcers couldn't afford when half of Seoul wanted them dead. He'd chosen survival. He'd walked away from the only person who had ever seen past the violence to the man underneath. And he'd never looked back. Couldn't. Because looking back meant admitting that killing yourself to save someone might be the cruelest thing you could do to them. Dong didn't do regret. His kills were clean. His escapes were flawless. His new life was a perfectly executed con. But now she was 40 feet away. And she wasn't alone. 2 little boys orbited around her, identical down to the stubborn set of their jaws as they argued over which surfboard to choose. They couldn't be more than 4 years old. Their dark hair stuck up in the same defiant way despite obvious attempts to comb it down. One boy, slightly bolder, kept pointing at the biggest board. His aggressive stance, the way his small fists clenched and his chin jutted forward in challenge. Dong's entire body went ice cold. That was his stance. His exact posture before a fight. The same coiled readiness he'd had in every syndicate training photo. The look that made grown men step back. The coconut in his hand slipped, cracking against the bamboo bar. Gung Woong turned, concerned. "Babe, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." but Yeongdong couldn't hear her questions. The tropical sounds faded into white noise. The world had narrowed to a single devastating truth. He had sons, 2 of them, and he'd been dead to them their entire lives. His feet moved on instinct, muscle memory from 100 approaches on 100 targets. Gung Woong's hand slipped from his arm as he walked toward the surfboards, toward Matilda, toward the 2 boys who were now looking up at the sound of breaking coconut shells. And when they turned, Yeongdong saw his own eyes staring back at him. Doubled. The same sharp focus. The same hunter's gaze. The same predatory awareness that had made syndicate rivals back down without a word spoken. 15 feet away. He stopped. Matilda had noticed him now. She stood slowly, every muscle tensing, instinctively moving between him and the boys. Her face cycled through shock, recognition, disbelief, and finally settled on something far more dangerous than anger. The look she'd given him the night she found out what he really did for a living. The look that said, "You're a ghost, and ghosts don't get to come back." The afternoon sun hung heavy over Coral Bay Resort, turning the ocean into liquid gold. Yeongdong leaned against the bamboo bar, genuinely laughing for what felt like the first time in weeks. Gung Woong had just told him about Mrs. Chen from Bungalow 7 trying to negotiate a discount using her Pomeranian as emotional leverage. She said Mr. Fluffkins has separation anxiety and needs an ocean view. Gung Woong giggled, wiping down the counter with practiced efficiency. Like the dog cares about the view. Yeongdong shook his head, grinning. "Did you give it to her?" "Of course I did. I'm a sucker." She reached across the bar and tapped his nose with one wet finger. "Just like someone else I know who gave that honeymooning couple a free upgrade because they reminded you of us. That's different. They were in love. We're in love, you ridiculous man." Gung Woong's smile could have powered the entire island. She grabbed a fresh coconut from the ice bucket, expertly macheteing the top off in 2 clean strikes. The blade work would have impressed his old crew. She had no idea. "Here, your favorite. Extra rum, light on the judgment." She slid the coconut across the bar. The little umbrella tilted at a jaunty angle. Their fingers touched as he took it, and she held on for just a moment longer, her thumb tracing circles on his knuckles. 6 weeks, she said softly. Her eyes were the color of warm honey, completely unguarded. 6 weeks and you're stuck with me forever, Dong. Last chance to run. Not running. His voice came out rougher than intended. Never running from you. Good. Because I already ordered 200 white orchids, and if you bail, I'm hunting you down. She was joking, but there was something fierce underneath it. Gung Woong loved hard and completely. It was one of the things that terrified him most about her. He raised the coconut in a mock toast, to Mrs. Chen's emotional support Pomeranian and to us. To us and our beautiful, simple, drama-free life. She clinked her water bottle against his coconut. God, we're so boring and I love it. Yeongdong took a sip, the rum burning perfectly down his throat, and let his gaze drift past Gung Woong's shoulder toward the beach. Late afternoon meant families packing up, couples taking sunset walks, the daily rhythm of paradise that he'd learned to anticipate and appreciate. That's when his world stopped. Near the surfboard rack, maybe 40 feet from the bar, a woman stood in the sand. Her back was to him, but he would have recognized that posture in complete darkness, in a crowd of thousands, with a bullet in his skull. The way she shifted her weight slightly to her left side, compensating for an old injury she'd gotten when she was 16. The particular shade of her hair, black with hints of deep brown when the light hit it just right. The graceful economy of her movements, as she reached down to adjust something at her feet. Matilda. His first thought was hallucination. Post-traumatic stress finally catching up after 5 years of looking over his shoulder. The dragon of soul seeing ghosts because guilt was a patient hunter. But then she straightened, and 2 small figures came into focus beside her. Boys, identical. 4, maybe 5 years old. White button-down shirts already half untucked. Blue shorts sandy at the knees. They were arguing about something, their hands gesturing wildly, and even from this distance, Yeongdong could see the aggressive set of their shoulders, the stubborn jut of their chins. The coconut drink turned to ash in his mouth. One of the boys, the slightly taller one, grabbed a yellow surfboard and tried to drag it toward the water. His brother immediately protested, pointing at a blue board instead. Their argument escalated, voices carrying across the sand in rapid Korean, Matilda said something sharp, and both boys froze mid-motion, properly chastised but still glaring at each other with identical expressions of frustrated determination. That expression. Young Dong had seen it in the mirror 10,000 times. The exact same furrowed brow, the same tight press of lips, the same refusal to back down even when outmatched. The color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. His vision tunneled. The tropical sounds around him, the reggae music from the speakers, the laughter of tourists, the crash of waves all faded into a high-pitched ringing. "Babe?" Gung Wung's voice cut through the static. "Yong, you okay?" He couldn't respond. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Matilda was supposed to be in Seoul. Matilda was supposed to have moved on, found someone safe, built a life that didn't include a dead man's ghost. Matilda was absolutely, definitely not supposed to be at his resort with two boys who had his eyes, his stance, his entire genetic blueprint stamped across their faces like an accusation. "Yongdong, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" Gung Wung's hand touched his arm, and he flinched. The coconut slipped from his grip, cracking against the bamboo bar and spilling rum and coconut water across the counter. He watched, detached, as the liquid pooled and dripped onto the sand below. Gung Wung followed his gaze, turning to look at whatever had stolen his attention so completely. He wanted to stop her, wanted to turn her face back to him, wanted to rewind 60 seconds and keep her in the beautiful ignorance of their simple, drama-free life. But it was too late. She saw Matilda first. Saw the elegant woman in the sundress, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Then her gaze dropped to the boys, still bickering over surfboards, and Gung Wung went very, very still. Even someone with no context could see it. The boys looked exactly like a younger version of the man standing frozen behind the bar. Same sharp features softened by youth, same intense dark eyes, same determined posture, same everything. "Dong?" Gung Wung's voice had changed. The warmth had evaporated, replaced by something cautious and confused. "Who are they?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. What could he possibly say? The truth was too large, too complicated, too devastating to fit into words. The lie wouldn't come either, blocked by the sheer magnitude of what was standing 40 feet away on his beach. Gung Wung looked back at the boys, then at him again, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "Those kids, they look just like..." "Dong, who are they?" The taller boy, the one with the yellow surfboard, looked up at that moment. His gaze swept the beach and landed, with uncanny precision, directly on Yongdong. For 3 heartbeats, father and son stared at each other across the sand. The boy's eyes narrowed, analytical and far too old for his age, studying Yongdong with the kind of focus that made veteran criminals nervous. Then the boy tugged on Matilda's dress and pointed. Yongdong watched as Matilda turned, following her son's gesture, and their eyes met for the first time in 5 years. Her face went through a dozen emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, disbelief, recognition. And then, finally, a cold fury that hit him harder than any fist ever had. Beside him, Gung Wung whispered, "Oh my God. Dong, what did you do?" He had no answer. The Dragon of Seoul, the man who'd orchestrated impossible heists and survived situations that killed legends, had absolutely no answer. If you despise secrets that ruin relationships, smash that subscribe button. Comment Truth Matters if you think Yongdong should have told Gung Wung about his past before proposing. Yongdong moved before conscious thought could stop him. Muscle memory from 100 intercepts, 1,000 operations where timing meant the difference between success and a body bag. He vaulted over the bar with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years training his body to be a weapon, ignoring Gung Wung's startled cry behind him. "Stay there," he said without looking back. Not a request. A command in a voice she'd never heard him use before. His feet hit the sand, and he was already calculating angles, approach vectors, the cleanest path that would keep the boys from seeing him too clearly. Matilda had turned away again, crouching down to say something to the shorter twin. Her body language protective and tight. She hadn't fully registered that it was him yet. Hadn't processed that her dead fiancé was alive and running a resort like some kind of sick cosmic joke. He had maybe 30 seconds before that changed. The tiki hut sat off to the side of the main beach area, a covered structure where they stored extra equipment and served afternoon snacks. Its shadows would give them privacy. Its position would shield the boys from seeing too much. Young Dong angled his approach, coming at Matilda from the side, using a group of German tourists as temporary cover. 20 feet, 15, 10. Jack, put that board back, Matilda was saying in Korean, her voice carrying that particular maternal warning that meant business. We talked about asking first, but Jeremy wants the blue one and I want. Jeremy can speak for himself. Both of you. 5 minutes to decide together or we're going back to the bungalow. 5 feet. Young Dong's hand closed around her elbow, gentle but absolutely firm. Matilda. Now. Don't make a scene. She spun, instinct turning her toward the threat, and her free hand came up fast, aiming for his throat in a defensive strike he'd taught her years ago, in case anyone from the syndicate ever came for her. He caught her wrist before it connected, redirected her momentum, and pulled her toward the tiki hut, in one smooth motion that would have looked to anyone watching like an intimate embrace between lovers. Let go of me, she hissed, but she was already moving with him, her maternal instinct overriding everything else. Get the threat away from the children first, assess later. Good, she'd learned. The boys stay where they are, he said quietly, urgently. I'm not here to hurt anyone. We need to talk. 30 seconds, please. They rounded the corner of the tiki hut and he released her immediately, hands up, stepping back to give her space. The shadows swallowed them, the sounds of the beach muffling into distant ambiance. Matilda stared at him like he was a corpse that had climbed out of its grave. Her chest was heaving, her eyes wide and wild. You're dead. You're supposed to be dead. Matilda. The slap came so fast he almost didn't register it until his cheek was stinging and his head had snapped to the side. She'd put everything behind it. 5 years of grief, rage, betrayal, and whatever else she'd been carrying since the night he'd disappeared. He took it. Didn't block, didn't move, didn't defend. He deserved it. Deserved much worse. You're dead, she repeated, and now her voice was shaking. They found your car, your blood, your wallet. The syndicate sent flowers to a funeral I held for an empty casket. I know. I'm sorry. I had to what? Had to let me believe you were murdered? Had to let me spend 6 months looking over my shoulder waiting for them to come for me next? Had to let me wake up every night screaming because I kept seeing what they might have done to you? Her hands were fists now, trembling at her sides. Tears were starting, angry tears that she blinked back furiously. You died. I mourned you. I moved on. I can explain. Explain? She laughed, a broken sound that cut through him worse than any blade. You disappeared 5 years ago without a word, without a phone call, without a note. You let me think you were dead, Young. You let me bury you. I was protecting you. The words came out defensive, hollow even to his own ears. The syndicate was cleaning house. They were killing anyone connected to the Lee operation. I had targets on me from 3 different crews. Staying meant painting you with the same target. So you chose death over trust, over telling me, over letting me decide if I wanted to face that risk with you. Matilda's voice dropped to something more dangerous than shouting. You made that choice alone. I made the only choice that kept you alive. And it never occurred to you that I was already pregnant? The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. That I'd been trying to tell you for 3 days before you vanished? That I was carrying your children? The world tilted. Young Dong grabbed the tiki hut support beam to steady himself. What? Jack and Jeremy, your sons, 4 years old, conceived that last week we were together before you decided to become a ghost. Her laugh was bitter. I found out 2 weeks after your funeral. Stood in a bathroom at my sister's apartment, staring at 2 pink lines, wondering how I was supposed to raise children alone when their father was dead and the syndicate might come for them. Matilda, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You were too busy being dead. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Do you know what it's like to tell 4-year-old boys that their father was a hero who died protecting people? Do you know how many times Jack has asked me what you looked like? Jeremy has nightmares where faceless men come to take me away like they took his daddy. I never meant. You never asked. You decided. You chose. You played God with my life and theirs, and you didn't give any of us a vote. She wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. And now you're here, running a resort, playing house with some woman, living your best life while I've been raising your sons in soul, jumping at every shadow, wondering if the syndicate would ever figure out those boys were yours. The syndicate thinks I'm dead. Did they? It wasn't a question. Then why am I here, young? Why am I at a resort on a random island in the middle of nowhere instead of home and soul? The cold that had been pooling in his gut turned to ice. Matilda, why are you here? She met his eyes, and he saw the fear underneath the anger. The same fear he'd seen the night everything went wrong 5 years ago. 2 weeks ago, someone burned down my apartment, left a message spray